I once asked a Sunday school boy in my parish, "Tell me, what did you learn in the Sunday school today?" He replied, "Today our teacher taught us about when Jesus went to a wedding and turned water into wine." "Oh," I said, "and what did you learn from that story?" The boy was a bit embarrassed. It was apparent he hadn't thought about this. But then he lifted up his face and said, "If you are going to have a wedding, make sure you invite Jesus." Weddings, indeed, in many ancient and traditional cultures were, and in some places still are, significant events that involve the entire community. These celebrations often included extended feasts, music, dancing, and other forms of entertainment. They were seen not only as personal milestones for the bride and the groom, but also as social occasions that strengthened community bonds. The length and extravagance of such events offered a break from the often dull, colorless, and boring day-to-day life and brought joy and unity to everyone involved. In the story of the wedding at Cana, the shortage of wine could indeed be seen as a social blunder and a potential symbol of lack or unfulfilled potential. In biblical times, weddings were significant social gatherings, and running out of wine would likely have reflected poorly on the host's ability to provide for their guests, and it perhaps foreshadowed a rocky start to their married life. However, when Jesus intervenes and turns water into wine, it isn't just any wine. It is of the highest quality, as noted by the master of banquets. This miracle serves as a powerful symbol of transformation and divine abundance. It suggests that when Jesus is part of the celebration, what might be lacking can be transformed into something bountiful and joyful. Therefore, the presence of Jesus at the wedding highlights the importance of spiritual inclusion and divine intervention in bringing about fullness of joy in life. So Mary approaches Jesus and asks him to do something. What was his response? "Why do you involve me, woman?" The term woman, while it might sound disrespectful in contemporary English, it did not carry the same connotation in the first century Jewish culture. It was a form of address that could be respectful, somewhat like saying "ma'am" today. But you have to look at the scene in its historical context. Jesus, at this moment, had not performed a single miracle. He was 30 years old and had just gathered together his disciples. He knows that if he performs a miracle, a clock will start ticking and it will not stop until he gets to Calvary. Crowds will flock, investigators will be dispatched. So, is this the appropriate moment? He concludes that it is. Everything seems to be in place. So he makes his move and gives his first public sign that he is different. He transforms water into wine. So what do we learn from this story? First, it is a pivotal moment of Jesus and his disciples. First, let's take a look at the miraculous sign. It was a custom in that time to serve the best wine first and the lesser at the end of the celebration. Now, let's be honest. We are not talking about taste. The best wine contains the higher percentage of alcohol. It takes time to ferment wine, and time is money. So when this fermented wine is presented to the master of the banquet near the end of the festivities, he was impressed. The earlier wine had been good, but this was even better. But this was not the miracle. The miracle was known only to a few, the disciples and the servants who brought the water in, and it seems to Mary, who knew about it even before Jesus. Turning the water into wine has long been viewed as one of Jesus' more unique miracles. Poor planning has caused this wedding to come to a grinding halt. Mary asks Jesus to resolve the issue. It is an imposition on son, but mothers are used to imposing upon their children. Jesus is not pleased. What has this to do with me? I am not the caterer. It makes you wonder if Mary knew Jesus could produce some wine at will, or whether she simply expected him to go out and get some. I tend to think she knew. She knew he possessed powers, that he could perform a miracle. The scriptures say this was the first of his miraculous signs. I think this was his first public miracle. At this critical moment of the beginning of his ministry, a second thing is done. There is an unveiling of his glory. The miracle at Cana, as recounted in the Gospel of John, is indeed an understated but profoundly significant event. While not as dramatic or public as some of Jesus' later miracles, it possesses several layers of meaning and significance. It is remarkable that Jesus chose to start his ministry with this miracle. By all measures, it is not one of his more flamboyant. It wasn't on the scale of parting the Red Sea and crushing the Egyptian army. It certainly isn't as verifiable as raising Lazarus from the dead. In no way is it as public as the feeding of the 5,000. The servants and the disciples seem to be the only ones who know. In the end, Jesus' first miracle, the one that lets us know that the Messiah has arrived, simply corrects a bit of poor planning on the part of the wedding caterer. It is almost anticlimactic. The story ends in this way. In this, the first of his miraculous signs, he revealed his glory. Why this one? Why not a more theatrical sign? It is because this miracle defines Jesus' ministry. It is not packed with persuasive power. It is rather driven by humble acts of service. The faith journey of the disciples begins. It is a pivotal moment, a crucial moment, and in this moment, three critical things are set in motion. First, a miracle is performed. Second, Jesus' glory is revealed. And third, for the disciples, their faith has begun. Let me ask you, why do the disciples put their faith in Jesus? Is it simply because of the miracle? You must remember, they have only been with him for a few days. They have seen no proof that he is anything else but a teacher and only heard a bit of his teaching. Is it the miracle that wins their devotion or something else? It seems to me that the miracle is part of it, but not all of it. Something else is at work here. Think of the history of Israel. How long had they been around? At this time in history, they have been around as a tribe and as a nation for close to 2,000 years. Think of all the things they have been through. The beginnings in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph and the hundreds of years of slavery in Egypt. Moses and the Exodus. The wandering in the wilderness and the giving of the law. Joshua and the conquest of the promised land. The years of tribal wars to gain possession of the land. The rise of kings, Saul, David, and Solomon. The work of the prophets, the civil war and the division of the kingdom, the Babylonian captivity, the return from the captivity, and the rebuilding of Jerusalem. It is into this world that Jesus steps. This is the world of Jesus' disciples. It is a Greek world. and their little region is now part of Rome. In a word, the nation's wine has run out. God seems to have abandoned Israel. The disciples, along with the nations, have lost hope. What are you going to do when the wine runs out? It happens in our own lives. The wine runs out. We become strangers to ourselves and we have nowhere to go. What are you going to do when the wine runs out? It is a sad truth that we usually don't come to God until we have a need. Jesus was not approached until there was an emergency. We are the same way. We usually come when we have a need. I'm not saying that this is right or even desirable. I'm simply saying that it is a fact of life that religion for most people is an emergency affair. Mary came to Jesus when the wine jars were empty. You will come too, but not before you are drained and exhausted and when life's unpredictable demands brings you to your wits' end. He touches the wedding and lifts it not just with the miracle, but also by His presence. He takes the ordinary wedding and He transforms it into that which is extraordinary. He takes a fisherman by the name of Peter and transforms him into the great missionary that he is. He takes a young, frail and frightened girl by the name of Teresa and transforms her into the Pulitzer Prize of Peace by the name of Mother Teresa. He takes that which is ordinary and transforms it. Everyone else serves the cheap wine near the end, but He saves the best till last. The lesson was not lost on the disciples who joined Him at the wedding that night in Cana. Don't let it be lost on you. May Jesus Christ be praised.